Welcome back to our next indie horror game, Mr. Widemouth. If you're not a big creepypasta reader or don't listen to a lot of short horror narration like I do, both of, you're probably not familiar with this material, but this is a story that someone's made a game out of. And that's pretty much what the creature in the story looked like in the source material image. I will read you the actual story at the end of this. It's pretty short. Should only take like 5 minutes to read it. But I really want to see how well they adapted, whoever made this game adapted to the actual story. Because I love the story. I find the ending of the actual creepypasta to be extremely unsettling. And you'll see why when I actually read it. But let's see what we've got here. I hadn't been here since my childhood. It's time to put an end to the nightmares. Okay, so it sounds like this is going to start where the original story ended, because the ending of the creepypasta is the child in the story returning to the house as an adult. And then I can't tell you what happens after that because it would be a huge spoiler for the end of the story. But let's just go on here and see. Because this sounds like he's come back here with the specific intention of finding the creature in the story and destroying it, which is not what happened in the source story at all. But here we go. What is that? It looks like a book. Oh, it's a note. Since my father's job was complicated, we had to move from state to state. Because of this, I had no friends. It was outside the house where I met the creature. Mr. Widemouth was his name. He said he was from a magic world. We became friends. Alright, so we got 8 more notes to find. There's one. Time passed, and he showed me a trick. He jumped off the room and bounced back. Then he told me to do the same. Okay, I'm guessing that is just an error in translation from whoever made this game is from. Because he said jumped off the room. What he means is the point in the story where the creature... I can't explain this without spoiling it. There's a part in the story where the creature leads the child to an upstairs bedroom, or upstairs window, and he jumps out the window and then immediately bounces back in through the window. And then he tells the kid to do the same, and the kid doesn't want to do it because, you know, he knows he's going to get hurt really bad or die if he jumps out, you know, out the window. And Widemouth tries to tell him that it'll be okay, that as long as he imagines hard enough, he'll just bounce back like Widemouth did. But the kid refuses to do it because he's not a nitwit. But that's what that note was talking about. I told him that I would die. He insisted me to believe and do it, but after I said no, he frowned and left. Yeah, that part's true. Alright. Later he appeared again at night. He wanted to show me another trick. This time, he juggled with knives. Yeah, that happened in the story too. He offered me them to do the same. Once again I said no. He frowned and left again. Here we go. Time passed, and I met him outside where he wanted to take me to his magical world, to the path next to the house. Little different. I told him my parents said I couldn't go there, but he pulled me by the arm. My father saved me by shouting my name. The creature disappeared, and I ran inside the house. Alright, we missed a note somewhere. Oh, there it is, right there. I stayed beside my father since we moved a week later. From the car, I saw Mr. Widemouth waving at me sadly. I didn't. For some reason, they didn't finish that sentence. What he said is, I didn't wave back. As they're pulling away for the last time, he looks up and sees Widemouth in the window, waving at him sadly, and he doesn't wave back at him. Alright, so I guess... Alright, I don't know how to do this without spoiling a little bit of the story. Essentially what happened at the end of the story is that he came back to the house as an adult. Big difference, though. In this game, the house is still here. In the story, when he came back, the house wasn't there anymore. Because it had burned down at some point. But at the very end of the story is him finding the trail that Widemouth tried to lead him down. I'm not going to tell you what he found at the end of it. You'll find that at the end of the story. Alright, so somewhere in these trees is the path we need to find. Sit here. This looks like the only open spot. Yeah, this is it. Mary, 1880, 1888. So there's 6 of these we need to find. Why are we reading gravestones? Well, that'll make sense when we read the actual story as well. Ted, 1895, 1900. Notice that these are all very young children's graves. There's a reason for that. Sarah, 1910 to 1917. Bruce, 1922, 1928. Margaret, 1931, 1939. We missed a gravestone somewhere. Somewhere there's another one that we did not read. I don't see the 6th one. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Where's the last one? Damn it. Oh, it's probably that big one right in the middle. Edward, 1944 to 1948. Alright. Well, now where do we go? Oh, shit. You. Hello, old friend. Stay away from me. Why? We used to be best friends. We used to be the best pals. You tried to trick me to death. Yeah, the developer of this is not... English is not their native language. What is funner than that? I won't let you do this anymore. Ah, how so? I'm immortal. Not anymore. I got what I need. What? You were famous among the Celtic folk. No! Stop! Press E to place the totem. It's done. Yeah, that did not happen in the story at all. I stayed in the house to make sure the creature was gone. Suddenly, hunger attacked me. Nothing would stop it, but I knew. I had to wait while my body changed. When the first family came, it started. I became Mr. Widemouth. Right, so that is not at all how the source material story ended. And I appreciate that, you took it where the original story ended and tried to, add to it and expand upon it. But I honestly, I find the ending of the original story much, much more eerie and unsettling. So, I'm going to read that now so you can see, how that differed from the actual source story. And you'll see why I think the ending of the source story is better. During my childhood, my family was like a drop of water in a vast river, never remaining in one location for long. We settled in Rhode Island when I was 8, and there we remained until I went to college in Colorado Springs. Most of my memories are rooted in Rhode Island, but there are fragments in the attic of my brain which belong to the various homes we had lived in when I was much younger. Most of these memories are unclear and pointless. Chasing after another boy in the backyard of a house in North Carolina, trying to build a raft to float on the creek behind the apartment we rented in Pennsylvania, and so on. But there is one set of memories which remains as clear as glass, as though they were made just yesterday. I often wonder whether these memories are simply lucid dreams produced by the long sickness I experienced that spring. But in my heart, I know they are real. We were living in a house just outside the bustling metropolis of New Vineyard, Maine, population 643. It was a large structure, especially for a family of 3. There were a number of rooms that I didn't see in the 5 months we resided there. In some ways it was a waste of space, but it was the only house on the market at the time, at least within an hour's commute to my father's place of work. The day after my 5th birthday, attended by my parents alone, I came down with a fever. The doctor said I had mononucleosis, which meant no rough play and more fever for at least another 3 weeks. It was horrible timing to be bedridden. We were in the process of packing our things to move to Pennsylvania, and most of my things were already packed away in boxes, leaving my room barren. My mother brought me ginger ale and books several times a day, and these served the function of being my primary form of entertainment for the next few weeks. Boredom always loomed just around the corner, waiting to rear its ugly head and compound my misery. I don't exactly recall how I met Mr. Widemouth. I think it was about a week after I was diagnosed with mono. My first memory of the small creature was asking him if he had a name. He told me to call him Mr. Widemouth because his mouth was large. In fact, everything about him was large in comparison to his body. His head, his eyes, his crooked ears. But his mouth was by far the largest. "You look kind of like a Furby," I said, as he flipped through one of my books. Mr. Widemouth stopped and gave me a puzzled look. "Furby? What's a Furby?" he asked. I shrugged. "You know, the toy. The little robot with the big ears. You can pet and feed them, almost like a real pet." "Oh," Mr. Widemouth resumed his activity. "You don't need one of those. They aren't the same as having a real friend." I remember Mr. Widemouth disappearing every time my mother stopped by to check on me. "I lay under your bed," he later explained. "I don't want your parents to see me because I'm afraid they won't let us play anymore." We didn't do much during those first few days. Mr. Widemouth just looked at my books, fascinated by the stories and pictures they contained. The third or fourth morning after I met him, he greeted me with a large smile on his face. "I have a new game we can play," he said. "We have to wait until after your mother comes to check on you, because she can't see us play it. It's a secret game." After my mother delivered two more books and soda at the usual time, Mr. Widemouth slipped out from under the bed and tugged my hand. "We have to go to the room at the end of this hallway," he said. I objected at first, as my parents had forbidden me to leave my bed without their permission, but Mr. Widemouth persisted until I gave in. The room in question had no furniture or wallpaper. Its only distinguishing feature was a window opposite the doorway. Mr. Widemouth darted across the room and gave the window a firm push, flinging it open. He then beckoned me to look out at the ground below. We were on the second story of the house, but it was on a hill, and from this angle the drop was farther than 2 stories due to the incline. "I like to play pretend up here," Mr. Widemouth explained. "I pretend that there's a big soft trampoline below this window, and I jump. If you pretend hard enough, you bounce back up like a feather. I want you to try." Suck. I accidentally... There we go. I accidentally closed the... I was a 5-year-old with a fever, so only a hint of skepticism darted through my thoughts as I looked down and considered the possibility. "It's a long drop," I said. "Oh, but that's all part of the fun." "It wouldn't be fun if it was only a short drop. If it were that way, you may as well just bounce on a real trampoline." I toyed with the idea, picturing myself falling through thin air only to bounce back to the window on something unseen by human eyes. But the realist in me prevailed. "Maybe some other time," I said. "I don't know if I have enough imagination. I could get hurt." Mr. Widemouth's face contorted into a snarl, but only for a moment. Anger gave way to disappointment. "If you say so," he said. He spent the rest of the day under my bed, quiet as a mouse. The following morning, Mr. Widemouth arrived holding a small box. "I want to teach you how to juggle," he said. "Here are some things you can use to practice before I start giving you lessons." I looked in the box. It was full of knives. "My parents will kill me," I shouted, horrified that Mr. Widemouth had brought knives into my room, objects that my parents would never allow me to touch. I'll be spanked and grounded for a year." Mr. Widemouth frowned. "It's fun to juggle with these. I want you to try it." I pushed the box away. "I can't. I'll get in trouble. Knives aren't safe to just throw into the air." Mr. Widemouth's frown deepened into a scowl. He took the box of knives and slid under my bed, remaining there the rest of the day. I began to wonder how often he was under me. I started having trouble sleeping after that. Mr. Widemouth often woke me up at night, saying he put a real trampoline under the window, a big one that I couldn't see in the dark. I always declined and tried to go back to sleep, but Mr. Widemouth persisted. Sometimes he stayed by my side until early in the morning, encouraging me to jump. He wasn't so fun to play with anymore. My mother came to me one morning and told me I had her permission to walk around outside. She thought the fresh air would be good for me, especially after being confined to my room for so long. Ecstatic, I put on my sneakers and trotted out to the back porch, yearning for the feeling of the sun on my face. Mr. Widemouth was waiting for me. "I have something I want you to see," he said. I must have given him a weird look, because he then said, "It's safe, I promise." I followed him to the beginning of a deer trail which ran through the woods behind the house.
This is an important path, he explained. I've had a lot of friends about your age. When they were ready, I took them down this path to a special place. You aren't ready yet, but one day I hope to take you there. I returned to the house, wondering what kind of place lay beyond that trail. 2 weeks after I met Mr. Widemouth, the last load of our things had been packed into a moving truck. I would be in the cab of that truck, sitting next to my father for the long drive to Pennsylvania. I considered telling Mr. Widemouth that I would be leaving, but even at 5 years old, I was beginning to suspect that perhaps the creature's intentions were not to my benefit, despite what he said otherwise. For this reason, I decided to keep my departure a secret. My father and I were in the truck at 4 a.m. He was hoping to make it to Pennsylvania by lunchtime tomorrow with the help of an endless supply of coffee and a six-pack of energy drinks. He seemed more like a man who was about to run a marathon rather than one who was about to spend 2 days sitting still. "Early enough for you?" he asked. I nodded and placed my head against the window, hoping for some sleep before the sun came up. I felt my father's hand on my shoulder. "This is the last move, son, I promise. I know it's hard for you, as sick as you've been. Once Daddy gets promoted, we can settle down and you can make friends." I opened my eyes as we backed out of the driveway. I saw Mr. Widemouth's silhouette in my bedroom window. He stood motionless until the truck was about to turn onto the main road. He gave a pitiful little wave goodbye, steak knife in hand. I didn't wave back. Years later, I returned to New Vineyard. The piece of land our house stood upon was empty except for the foundation, as the house burned down a few years after my family left. Out of curiosity, I followed the deer trail that Mr. Widemouth had shown me. Part of me expected him to jump out from behind his tree and scare the living bejesus out of me, but I felt that Mr. Widemouth was gone, somehow tied to the house that no longer existed. The trail ended at the New Vineyard Memorial Cemetery. I noticed that many of the tombstones belonged to children. See how absolutely unsettling the end of that is? Like, even as a child, he was, this kid's no fool. Like, he figured it out. This creature is trying to hurt or even kill him. But to go back there as an adult and, to go down that trail where this thing had told him, "This is where I take all my friends your age to a special place." And then finding all of those children's graves in that cemetery and realizing that this creature has been responsible for the deaths of all of those children. That is it's so unnerving and so unsettling. I really wish it was a more well-known and popular story than it probably is. But I like that game for what it is. You took it where the original material ended and tried to, change it a little bit. And I find it really interesting, the idea that, he was able to banish the creature but then had to take its place. That's pretty cool. I like that. It's a good idea. But I still like the ending of the source story better. But that was Mr. Widemouth. The link for that is in the description. As always, thank you for watching. Like that if you liked it. Dislike it if you didn't. We'll see you in the next game.